Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Opcast. I am your host, Bo Higgins, and have the pleasure of being joined today by JD Do, and we will dig into what JD is doing shortly. For those that may not be familiar with Oplign, Oplign is a free resource for veterans and military spouses that helps them align their job skills to open jobs. So, free resource, check out www.oplign.com, and you can see how you, as a veteran, military spouse, or student veteran, align to the job market. Or if you're a company and you need to hire veteran talent, we can help you find and access amazing, great veterans, great student veterans, and great military spouses as well. But today we are here on the show with my friend JD. Let's back it all the way up to, your time in the military. You were in the Army. How'd that all start?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Hopefully, we will not go into the realms of either science fiction or horror with this. We'll keep it from a primarily a historical perspective. But for me, it was actually a military service, and specifically service in the United States Army, was something that was always a part of my mind, and always sort of probably a part of my family as well. For me, it actually probably started with the example of my grandfather. Both my grandfathers served in World War II, but my maternal grandfather in particular, he actually was a student at a small technical college in West Texas during the Depression. Because of the nature of the Depression, he then saw an opportunity to actually enlist in the Army, and then he was sending most of his pay back home to the family farm to help support the family during the Great Depression. As World War II approached, he went from being a staff sergeant, was promoted to being a second lieutenant, received a commission there, and then served as a cavalry officer during both World War II as well as Korea. So that was probably the initial inspiration. And then I just happened, when I was in the 5th grade of elementary school, check out a book from the library, and that book happened to be about West Point. I mean, the combination of both that sort of family sort of tradition and personal inspiration, plus this book, I just became really, really interested in pursuing that, and I stuck with it. And then stuck with it even after being a cadet at West Point, through a career in the Army. The Army gave me many opportunities, and in fact allowed me to go back to West Point to teach. So then whenever it's time for me to retire, I could actually look back, and I had a balance, almost mathematical balance, of the number of years that I spent on the teaching part of the Army and sort of like the writing and the thinking part of the Army. And yes, there is a part of the Army that does attempt to think, and a part that was in your typical sort of operational assignments. To include the last command that I had was actually in the same unit that my grandfather had been in during World War II. So I was actually able to represent that unit at a couple of the villages, even in the Czech Republic, that he was actually there in 1945. I was able to be back there in 2015 to celebrate some of those occurrences. So it sort of was a full circle moment for both the start as well as then ultimately the tail end of my Army career.
I love that story, man. That is great. And it's great you knew from such a young age. And again, there's
Yeah.
so many folks that I bring on the podcast, talk about their family influence and how that passed down from generation to generation. Certainly for me, my dad had been a Marine, enlisted Marine before I was born, but I heard the stories, right? Yeah, I think you hear the stories and you hear about the buddies, and he was always getting in trouble doing something, and it was fascinating to me. And I think it just planted that seed at an early age, and you never know. The rest is history, right? So that's great stuff. Great stuff.
It absolutely does. And then I think with so many of us, that's a key aspect of some of those seeds that are planted then result in this career. And it's a deeply, deeply meaningful career, particularly in terms of one's identity, right? And that's a huge sort of piece because, from the get-go, I thought I was always going to be a soldier. I was going to be an officer. And then I was an officer for so long. And when you look at the totality of that sort of just visualizing yourself as that particular identity, that was it still is the vast majority of my life. Not only my vast majority of my adult life, but then that actually was the vast majority of my life. That was my not just professional identity, but my identity.
I love it, man. That's great. That's great. And talking about that identity, obviously you are still in the military space today, but I really want to focus on your transition because so many veterans, I feel, they can lose their identity when they leave the military, right? Especially if you've grown up, you wanted to be, a soldier since you were in the 5th grade or even before that.
Yeah.
And then to have a 20-year career, not even mention the West Point. And then all of a sudden, at some point, everybody's career ends, right? And how do you maintain, that identity, or how do you kind of maybe repurpose your
I
identity
didn't.
when you lose the uniform? I'd really like to just dig in. What was your transition like, and what was your decision to get out, or kind of
Yeah.
what was the kind of calculus on the timing, and how you made that call, and maybe walk us through your transition a little bit as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think a key aspect as I look back on that transition, I actually sort of visualize it in the form of questions. And I wasn't, nor perhaps do any of us. Well, I know from a fact as an individual, I wasn't always asking the right questions about how to navigate that sort of a transition at different sort of points in time. So I decided to retire just past the 20-year mark. And as I sort of describe it in the work that I do now, it's one of those pieces where when you know, right? Sometimes there's like some very visual, some very clear indicators that are there. But for us and our family, it was very much an emerging sort of family decision. But I ended up finding myself as I was then trying to explore different options. I really didn't have a very good sort of azimuth that I was trying to sort of navigate towards. I will reflect back and realize that like my sort of cocktail hour joke was, what am I going to do when I grow up, right? Which can be an inspiring sort of question. It's great when you're 18, right? It's a little bit more terrifying like when you're in your 40s. But I remember very, very evocatively, it was the day where my wife and I, we've been talking about retiring. I had submitted my paperwork, and my kids were 9 and 10 at the time. And it was the day we decided to tell the kids that I was retiring out of the Army. My last assignment was in the Pentagon. It was a pretty intense assignment, and so it was one of those pieces where I would take the park and ride bus from Northern Virginia to the Pentagon. But some of the challenges of commuting on the bus to the Pentagon is that the buses actually stop running, like right around like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. The metro will keep on going a little bit past midnight, but I had a particular job that sometimes I would have to work past that point in time. So I could get back near our house via the metro, but I would still have to get back to either where like my bicycle was. Sometimes I'd bike into the park and ride, or my car. So I'd have to call my wife and see which line was best for me to get back on, where she might be finishing up like the kids' evening activities. Do I take the blue line? Do I take the yellow line? But that was a part of our calculus of when it was time. But when we told the two kids that I was retiring from the Army, my daughter's face dropped, and her first question out of her mouth was, does that mean I'm not a military child anymore? And it was that conversation in our living room in Fairfax Station, Virginia, where I realized that I was actually asking the wrong questions, because I was focused solely on what am I going to do. And then I'm looking at this 9-year-old kid who has been around the Army, but it's very much a part of her identity. And I think it is that question of identity where it's not only the most important, it's also sometimes one of the most difficult ones to fully address, and to address authentically, to address through the right skills, the right relationships, the right opportunities. And it was after hearing my daughter sort of utter that really, really profound question that I started to ask those different questions of myself. And a colleague that I'd known just a little bit in the Army, but had gone on, and he was actually at LinkedIn at the time. He happened to send me a link to a nonprofit organization in terms of the Pat Tillman Foundation, with the simple piece of, hey, interesting opportunity. You might be a good fit. I showed the opportunity to my wife, and her response essentially was, hey, this looks pretty cool. Don't screw it up. And that actually sort of shifted my entire sort of outlook for that. And I found a community, right? I found different professional relationships, which were significantly different from my relationships within the Army, but was still in the veteran space. I was still actually able to enjoy elements of camaraderie and kinship, as well as mission and purpose. And for me, that ended up being like really, really critical, that I was perhaps going down what could have been some promising trajectories, but trajectories that just really weren't fully aligned with where I was, where my family was, and where we wanted to go. And so again, that question from my from my 9-year-old kid in our living room.
I love that story, because I mean, I think it does highlight that, the transition process it's a family affair, right? I mean, your family is a big part of it. Certainly for me, I mean, I got out after 25 years, and the main decision to get out was my family. My oldest, I just finished her freshman year of high school. It was like one of those decision points of like, okay, am I going to keep moving her during high school, or am I going to get out now and kind of put some roots down, and that was a big piece of it. Because again, I think it's easy to focus on, yeah, for the me piece of it, like, what do I want to
Yeah.
do? What am I going to do? How am I going to find my purpose? But, there's a lot of factors that go into it, especially again, after 20 years, 25 years, I think we all feel like we owe it to our families a little bit too. They get a vote in this thing, right? And I think that's important to keep in mind. And obviously you did that, but we're able to find the purpose too. It's interesting.
Right.
For me, my first job after the military was in a company that manufactured and installed fiber optic cable. And my kids were like, after 25 years of being saying their dad's a Marine, they're like, yeah, my dad used to be in the Marine Corps, and now he's like a cable guy. I'm like, bro, wasn't that it was a pretty good job. I thought I was okay, like,
Yeah.
they're like,
Yeah, but
oh, they
yeah.
were like invested in my, like, man, yeah, now it's not as cool. My dad's not as cool anymore. Like, oh man, that sucks, but yeah, kind of funny.
Yeah. It is funny, but again, I think it's an aspect that it's also, I think, one of the key things that one of the stark differences between the military and whether it's the nonprofit world, the corporate world, is that the military has all its different mottos, right? The Marines are always faithful. The Army is this will defend, but our unofficial motto, I always think, is like, hey, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing, right? That was at least my Army experience, and that's so much the case with like the structure that was there too. And again, as you're making that transition, you have like these compounding effects. There's these questions of identity, right? But then you're also going from one that has like all these clear markers of what it was, right? Whether it's the uniform, the structure, the relationships in which come with all of those things, and all of those just sort of are additional questions when you're used to just sort of seeing like slight different variations of the answer, right? Different units will have different culture, and yes, you navigate that, but it's not that stark sort of piece. Again, going from Marine to cable guy, or like Heartbreak Ridge to cable guy. I was thinking of that. You're going like from Clint Eastwood to to the Jim Carrey sort of character on that. But those, I think, are important things to at least think about. And then I think it's really key to be able to use relationships to help you make choices, as well as to navigate through those choices too.
100%. And I'd love you to kind of maybe share a little more about the Pat Tillman Foundation and what they do. I
Yeah.
think people are maybe generally familiar with his story a little bit. I certainly, I think Pat Tillman Foundation, I think Pints for Pat, which was a great,
Yeah.
one day a year kind of thing. But there's so much they do. I mean, talk about, getting into that, what the impact it had on your career trajectory, and kind of how it maybe launched you from there to where you are now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So at the heart of it, I mean, the Pat Tillman Foundation is really there to unite and empower a group of remarkable active duty service members, military spouses, and veterans. And they do so through a series of rather significant scholarships, as well as leadership development opportunities that the Tillman Foundation creates and sometimes puts on. But at the end of the day, they're also actively and intentionally creating a community. And for me, it was that community aspect that was the probably largest surprise of what they did, but it was actually really the most compelling and the most profound. Because an aspect in terms of the selection, yes, they're looking for potential and folks that can have significant potential impact in the future. They're looking for inspiration, but at the same point in time, they're also looking for a particular mindset. I mean, that's a mindset of a group of veterans and military connected people who are convinced that their best years of service are still in front of them rather than behind them. And that actual proactive perspective, that community-based perspective, is something that the more I learned about the organization as I researched the opportunity, as I had the honor and the privilege to go through the interview and the selection process for the role that I went into, that's what really sort of came to bear. That they're using the means of scholarship, they're using the means of leadership development to actually achieve a far more profound end, which was deeply aligned with the life of an individual in the form of Pat Tillman, that was absolutely dedicated to service, to intellectual curiosity and scholarship, to not just leadership, but humble leadership, and then at the end of the day, sort of impact. And it was generously sponsored by a number of different corporate partners, to include the NFL, right? I mean, the NFL, from the tragic day of Pat's death, was a key aspect of supporting that family, supporting Marie, and then subsequently supporting the foundation. And so it just sort of really helped me to express values of, again, service and scholarship, which again, as I mentioned earlier, when I look back on my own military career, half of it was in typical tactical assignments, half of it was sort of in more scholarly sort of assignments. But I was able to sort of use that current stepping stone to develop my own professional identity that is continuing in service, although it's a new chapter of service just outside of uniform. That's what it really sort of helped me to decide. And then it also helped connect me with this apparatus that are at many different institutions of higher education across the country that are intentionally, again, designed not just to support student veterans, but to truly empower them as a means to, again, a new chapter of service. And an old Army colleague that I knew dating back to our times as a cadet at West Point, we're on the faculty at West Point as well. He reached out to me from William and Mary. He's on the faculty here in the business school and said, "Hey, we just got a large philanthropic gift that's designed to really change how we support student veterans on campus. We'd like you to take a look at it from your perspective as the Pat Tillman Foundation, but as you take a look at it, keep in mind that you might be a good fit for that as well." So my two roles post-military, again, as I mentioned, the Tillman Foundation, it came to me from a colleague that was LinkedIn that reached out to me, right? So again, I was the beneficiary of a very what is now a deeply meaningful relationship. And then my second opportunity here at William and Mary, again, it was a result of this relational effect that had a key aspect of my military service, and then also connected me with an opportunity that I'm able to do at William and Mary every day now.
That's all. I mean, it highlights the power of network and the network
Yeah.
and networking, right? And again, it's something that I think we all stress this to anyone transitioning out to leverage your network. That's how you're going to get a job, right? It's great that you can go apply online all day, every day and get frustrated. But you can use a tool like an Oplign to help you. But at the end of the day, your network is what's going to 99%, 95, I don't know the exact numbers, but they're pretty high. I mean, for at least certainly for good jobs, having that network is so essential, especially to your point of people reaching out to you, right? It's not you even reaching out to them. It's just they know you're out there. They know you're looking maybe or in this transitional phase. And, to have the power of that network looking out for you is massive. That's great. It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
It is. And I think that's a really important point, too, because when you are in one of those periods of transition, and one can make the argument we're sort of always in, some aspect of transition in a particular point in our life, but some of those periods are more significant than others. I think it's a very common, almost sort of like broad psychological effect. And I'm not trying to diagnose or provide therapy to anybody here, but broadly psychologically speaking, it feels like you're losing agency, right? You're losing a part of yourself, right? We already talked about elements of identity. And then you add on again that stark contrast of a very developed framework versus the absence of a framework. And yet sometimes it's those relationships, it just sort of changes the dynamics ever so slightly, which actually gives you a degree of agency, which can also then build elements of confidence. And again, when you then have additional tools such as Oplign and relationships that are able to coach those things and put those things together, I think that's what then enables confidence to go through the roof. That then allows you to be able to make a choice again. Like, hey, this isn't happening to me. I am doing this, and these are the trade-offs. I might have to trade off maybe a little bit of geography or a longer commute, but the meaningfulness of the work and its significance and potentially compensation might do it for me. Or maybe compensation isn't exactly what you wanted, but again, you're being really intentional that it's near your neighborhood. You're able to spend more time with older kids that are in those high school years. And again, doing that intentionally, I think is a really, really important component that we probably don't talk enough about, right? And again, it's beyond just finding a job. It's putting you on that trajectory that finds you like really, really meaningful opportunities is really important too.
I think that's great insight. I mean, to be intentionality of it, I think is an important and maybe sometimes overlooked piece of the transition process and how you make it successful by doing it that way. Speaking of, again, your transition into William and Mary, I mean, I don't think most people necessarily think of William and Mary as being the most military friendly school. I mean, I know, I went to UVA, so I know where it is at least. And you started the program there. So maybe just share a little bit about why William and Mary Where is it? I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
give a little bit of for the audience that may not know more about William and Mary and why, who is this guy? And why are they doing this stuff and what they're doing and what you've been building there? It's like, it's pretty amazing.
No, I appreciate that. I think in many places we can sort of start with the name, right? Like one of the early things, even as I started to apply for this position itself, there's the reminder that William and Mary is actually a state school. It is a state school. It hasn't always been, but it's the nation's second oldest college. It was founded in 1693 by royal decree, and that's where William and Mary sort of comes from. But later on in its history, it became a state school, and we're a public school on that. And then even more importantly, our geographic context also really sort of gives us the mission and the duty and the responsibility to be as military friendly as possible, because we are equidistant. If you think about Virginia, if you think where Richmond is and Virginia Beach, we are right in the middle of those two sort of population centers in Virginia, which also places us super near Hampton Roads, a large concentration of both military veterans, military retirees, as well as active duty service members as well. And when you think about the veteran population, veterans comprise about 5.8% of the workforce in America. When you look at Virginia, that percentage of veterans in the workforce actually jumps up to 10. And when you look at the part of Virginia here in central Virginia near Hampton Roads, it's almost 15 the number of veterans that are in the workforce. So you can just sort of see, I mean, we have major installations of every service that's here, to include the world's largest naval base in terms of Norfolk Naval Station. You have additional naval special warfare concentrations further out in Virginia Beach, Naval Aviation. The Coast Guard Training Center at Yorktown is again only 18 miles away from our campus. Joint Base Langley Eustis. You have Fort Lee, that's not too far away, in Petersburg, which is right south of Richmond. So again, a densely populated military population, and the tradition within the business school in particular at William and Mary, and William and Mary as a whole, also led to this. For the past 15 years, we've had a program with the Training and Doctrine Command, now T2Com, which is the Transformation and Training Command in the Army, where they send active duty officers to get an MBA. At the tail end of that MBA, we actually have created a special course just for them, where they provide real world consultants projects back to problems that the Army's dealing with as well. So that infusion of military talent really then shaped the culture of the business school as well as the university to be just ripe for a spot where we're not just supporting military students and military connected students, we're actually intentionally empowering them.
That's awesome. Again, I think that's something most people probably don't know about. I mean, the demographics of it, you think, oh, Navy, Norfolk's there and Williamsburg, but it makes sense why you would invest in that. And again, what are you doing, at William? What kind of programs do you have that are, tailored toward the veteran community in particular?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we do is how we sort of visualize it. So we're visualizing providing supporting activities and programs from the time that somebody's an applicant until they're alumni. And what we're doing is it's really based off this idea that particularly student veterans and military connected students, they bring with them a unique lived military experience, right? It's just unique in so many ways, of exposure to real world problems, exposure to other human problems that are deeply transferable to all aspects of human professional life. But if you take that military experience and you add to it a world-class education, and if you add to those two things meaningful connections, that's what we think is really the necessary recipe for somebody to be able to thrive and to flourish in a mission to come. And so what we do to add things, we actually have just this past year, we had our first sort of pilot, and we're expanding and continuing it out, is that we actually have what we call a pre-orientation flourishing program just for our incoming student veterans. I mean, it's designed to do a couple of things. A, to connect them with each other, even across different disciplines, and B, connect them with different aspects of the university that's here just to help them. At the same time, we have a workshop that focuses on values, because values can then help inform and allow people to reflect on what motivates them, their future interests. We integrate elements such as Clifton Strengths Finder is that. So it's actually a 3 to 4 day workshop where you're asking the subordinate questions of what makes up my professional identity. and how do I want to start to adjust that before you start these classes of this world-class education program. So that piece is really designed to orient them not just to the university, and they get that in terms of their normal student orientation, but it's actually to orient them to this process and this opportunity that lies in front of them. How can I take this educational experience to really change in a meaningful way that has a trajectory to other connections that can help me have greater professional outcomes? So in addition to that pre-orientation program, they work their way through that in early August. They start into their fall semester. And then in October, we also have a curated mentorship program of other William and Mary veteran alumni or veteran ally alumni that have worked with a lot of veterans in the past, and we intentionally pair them up in that. So as they're going through their coursework, they now have an added professional relationship that is then designed to really carry on some of the reflective work that they did about the professional identity. And those two nodes, I think, is a unique way to approach it, but they're really, really important tools to move forward. And this is another piece to add into, is this where Oplign and EduLine, as we're using it in terms of William and Mary, adds to it as well. Because in that pre-orientation program, we're able, with members of my team sort of serving as sort of transition coaches and career coaches, to introduce this idea that it allows them to input their military experience, so importantly allows them to put in their future professional interests. And then we have a tool that's giving them recommendations on if it might be an external certification. And if it is, great. And then I have a fundraising apparatus that provides support for that. As important, it could be a scan in a search of our course catalogs that could create a really creative and insightful elective choice that again helps to empower these student veterans as they move forward. So the period to reflect, they have additional relationships and then additional tools like Opline. That's what we are doing to sort of really give additional resources to these folks to maximize their time in transition to be truly transformative.
That's awesome. I love the cradle to grave kind of support too. I mean, from day one to the alumni piece of it too, right? This is not something that's just a one-time thing. This is part of the journey from the whole experience. How many veterans do you have in it?
Yeah, so generally at any one time, we have about 350 student veterans or active duty students out of the student population of about 9,000 total at any point in time. About 150 of those 350 or so are in our online program. So again, things that are online accessible are really, really key. But even like our online MBA program, we're deeply intentional to have opportunities of residential weekends where we take a course, we take essentially like a 2 credit hour course, we jam it into a weekend, but we also tie it in with good weather patterns here at a beautiful campus that's then deeply relational on that too. So of those 350 folks that are going through at any point in time, a number of them will return back to uniform service. So we're planting seeds that might not bear fruition for another 10 years when it's time for them to retire or to transition out. And then we're also building this community that's in all sorts of different industries as well. And that ability to reach back to alumni as well.
What makes
Mm,
Mary special? Why? How do they find the resources? What's the
yeah.
bumper sticker for the program you have there? Aspirational.
Yeah. In terms of places to find us, you can go to William and Mary Military and Veteran Affairs or William and Mary Center for Military Transition. And it outlines the different resources that we have, an ability to connect with us as well. And really, the bumper sticker that we have is that again we exist to unite and empower really remarkable humans that happen to be veterans, and they're seeking growth, they're seeking curiosity, but more importantly, they are seeking connection. At the end of the day, we wanted to add two really important mindsets to transitioning service members or veterans way of looking at the world. And the first is actually what we call an expressive mindset, right? How do I express my values? And as importantly, how do I express my value, right? So within that expressive mindset, there's elements of identity that's there, right? There's elements of value alignment. There's an element of developing the skill to discern how your individual values might align well with an organization's culture, right? And in that element of expressive, there's an important piece that we're also deeply intentional about storytelling in that too. Added to that expressive mindset, we're a place of deep and abiding connection, right? If you ever visit Williamsburg and William and Mary, you're going to be taken in by the place and the beauty of the place. But if you come back to William and Mary, the reason you're coming back is actually the beauty and the power of the people that are there. And there's this relational mindset, which I think particularly as one is transitioning out of standing in a formation, which itself is a really profound thing to do. How do you form effective professional relationships in that new context? And we're deeply, deeply meaningful and intentional about that. It's a part of that orientation program. What does it mean to connect, to listen to others, to empathize with others, and to have that form of connection first and then lead second is a really important of what we teach. So that's a super long bumper sticker. That may be a bumper sticker we have to put on an RV, right? I was an armor officer in the Army, so I'm used to large vehicles. So my apologies for that. But where we want to go in the future is actually probably just increasing the accessibility of a lot of these resources as well. As I mentioned earlier, we have a sizable military student population in our online spaces. That's one of the things we're starting to kick off in earnest in January. We've just had the opportunity, again, through some transformative philanthropic gifts, to have a series of different sort of pilot programs that we've been able to learn from and apply to. And now we want to maintain that same rigor of thought, the rigor of academic excellence, and then expand it out so all of our students can be a beneficiary of, as well as a key contributor to this community that we're building.
I love it, JD. This is great. I've learned a ton. I appreciate your passion for it. I'm excited for what you are building. I'm sure you get calls from other schools that want to do similar things. I know y'all collaborate a lot in the university level. So it's great to see that, and just that shared sense of camaraderie and growth and really opening up doors for more and more veterans to get access to these resources. It's really great.
Yeah. And it absolutely is shared, right? I mean, it's, I think, very much a similar mindset and an aspect that we don't have all the right answers, right? We can't help ask, I think, what are probably among the right questions. But again, I think that's what brought Oplign, and that's what allowed us to intersect, right? And again, the collaborative effort, the complexity of transitioning from military service to meaningful civilian occupations is so complex and the demand is so great that I think collaboration is probably the only reasonable means to try to do that. And we're deeply appreciative of the folks who have helped us and helped us learn to build these pieces, as well as folks like Oplign, which provides such a remarkable tool that again empowers and grants agency to folks at the very point in time where they feel like they're overwhelmed with questions. It's a great way to start to take some of those questions and actually build hypotheses that then these relationships and these other resources can really bring to fruition and bring to reality.
Well, hey, JD, thank you for the time today. I really appreciate it. Love being in this space with you, and excited to see where the future holds, and look forward to talking to you again soon, man. Thanks again.
Likewise, always a pleasure, Bo. Be well.